Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Saturday night here in Denmark. And this video will be way different than we normally do. We've done it a few times with a different caveat to it. But I asked Twitter here, any ideas for a video tonight? The comment with the most likes is what we will do. And there were a lot of good suggestions here. I might pin this one to my bookmark here just to maybe have an idea for the future. Very good things came in. However, Triangle Investor, yes, I know this guy very well, and he said TA on uranium juniors versus developers producers. So that made me wondering if again we should do again. Uranium looks mighty fine as we speak, but again, could it be an idea to measure some juniors and maybe some smaller uranium miners versus the big guy? And the big guy is obviously Cameco, the blue chip of them all, maybe together with Kazatomprom, obviously, but definitely Cameco is the big player in the US when it comes to getting, uranium out of the ground, really. So Cameco is the benchmark, and also Cameco has performed insanely well since 2020. The March low there to now, it is up roughly 10x. An amazing run there for the blue chip. And we want to see here if there is a reason to rotate into some smaller juniors uh, um, instead of having, CCJ or Cameco. Again, not saying that you should sell it all, but definitely it might give you some thoughts on that. Maybe I need a bit more exposure. Maybe I can sell 10%, whatever, 20, whatever you want to do, and getting into, the smaller ones there. And you can do this for any uranium miners. You could take Energy Fuels, Denison Mines, it doesn't matter. Do the ratio and do your own personal TA and see if it makes sense to maybe have a big position in Cameco and you want to reduce it. You could maybe look for 3 candidates that has the best setup against Cameco when you measure these two. With that said, guys, I think we should definitely look into the charts. That's why we're here. That's what we do. Technical analysis is an amazing tool. Again, I'm not saying that I am the best. Obviously, my technique has flaws, but again, if you develop and improve every day, no one can blame you. So, let's just quickly look at the URNM. Everyone has seen this chart. If you are into the uranium space, obviously, again, March 2020 lows, massive run up there in a 1 to 5 wave edit wave, huge correction or sideways bullish consolidation is probably the better word for it. Getting very bullish there in summer 2023, and now we're above the 2020 highs. We've seen that before. Everyone has. Beautiful. Same thing for Cameco. Want to go to the weekly. Again, a lot of lines and doodles here, but anyways, Cameco, since the lows from 2020, it is up roughly 5x, almost 5x. Beautiful stuff here. In my view, we could actually go way higher, for the next 2 to 3 years. But again, we want to see if there's any reasoning to maybe rotate out of partly out of Cameco, or just to add into some smaller ones there if you want to have more exposure to the smaller ones. Again, they're a bit more risky, but they also have a lot more upside in the uranium sector. So here we are comparing URNJ against U.UN, that is the Physical Uranium Trust, just to see how the juniors are doing against the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, which has also been on a tear. So again, currently we're still in this golden falling wedge right here. It's not as pinchy as they usually are, but definitely we still have, second low, third low, false breakout down to the downside, and now we're up here again at the upper side. So basically what we're waiting for, hopefully, is if we can break on the fourth touch here, we can break that upper golden trend line. And at that point in time, in my view, uranium junior miners is definitely a better place to be, especially if we take out that high right there, making the first higher high in a very long time. Looking back, well, not a very long time, excuse me, the past 6 months. I thought this was URA, excuse me. URA goes back, 15 years. This one only goes back roughly 1 year. So definitely still in a bullish setup, but haven't triggered any bullish buys compared to the spot physical. We can do the same here again for URNJ, the juniors against Cameco, the big one here. Again, I will be on the daily here because we only have data that goes back 1 year. Here is actually a very interesting golden trend line coming down here. You can see how many connections we have all the way across there. And then we have actually a gap up here again, breaking out, retesting, massive run up. And ever since we have been correcting. What is intriguing about this chart is, again, we have one low, second low, third low, and that third low is actually a huge backtest of that golden trend line. And ever since, boom, it has been blasted off, right? From December into now. So for roughly 2 months, the the URNJ has outperformed 20% against CCJ. Beautiful. Also, we have taken out this blue resistance right here, again, with the breakout, the retesting resumption here, and now is currently in a very bullish yellow uptrend here, and it is my take that we will visit the flag high over here at roughly 0.6 before any bigger correction, you can say, not bigger, but before any pause. Usually you have a pause here where people are exiting their trades. But again, the moving averages is coming up nicely. It is my take that we will tag it here and then we will see what happens. But ultimately, we should break that high. This is in my view, just a continuation here, getting above that previous high. And again, when that happens, again, heavily in favor of URNJ. And we still are right now heavily favor URNJ compared to Cameco, outperforming, for the past 2 months or so. But given the fact that we have done all this work here, that is, in my view, a very good sign that we are going to go higher in favor of URNJ. So again, now we have looked at URNJ against Cameco. We have a bullish bias towards the juniors. I have taken roughly 8 minors. Again, I could have taken 8 different here, but these were some mentioned by the people on Twitter. So that is what we're going to do. FMC, we have to go back a very long time, 20 years. We will go back roughly 22 years, actually. Massive, well-connected, long-term golden trend line. You can just see how perfect it more or less is. 4 touches as we speak. And, ever since, for the past 10 years, we were in this expanding megaphone pattern here with actually a beautiful splitter right there. You can see the wicks and the interactions coming in the middle there. So very well defined there. Also, a false breakdown in the ratio. False breakdowns usually leads to a fast move in the opposite direction, very often visiting the upper trend line, in this case, the blue megaphone top right there. Obviously, if this is the real deal, clearly we have the big golden trend line as resistance, and that is far away, still 100%. But definitely, in my take here, we have a good chance of this megaphone here grinding higher, and we will have a big pause there, obviously. But again, that could be a break out from there. Again, it is an expanding megaphone, so that's a lot of volatility. Usually you have contraction. Usually you have contraction of some sort, so you are more sure that, at some point in time, we are going to have volatility expansion when we get out of this contraction. So here it's a bit more difficult to decide when to enter, but definitely that's false breakdown. In my view, we can go to the daily. Again, I think you should be looking at some entries here when it makes sense to go in. Again, you will have to do your own more detailed TA on that, but definitely That's a massive move, rejected there. And again, we're coming down. So I think, depending on how you see it here, you could be looking at FMC in favor of CCJ when you get your right setup. Obviously, the big one, the big bad boy is that one right there. So if you want to wait and you want to not be a part of this volatility right here, definitely breaking that golden trend line is the mother lode, clear sign that FMC is in favor of CCJ. Until then, there could be a lot of chop, but also a lot of moves to the upside and the downside within this expanding megaphone. Usually, you don't see these very often. Most of the time, you have contraction, as we just talked about. PEGA here, also a very a bit of a difficult chart to do, but the theme is the same. We have a massive golden trend line here. We've only have 2 touches in this case. So again, not fully. I would have preferred to have a third touch, at the same distance, more or less. But clearly that is not the case. So I try to do my best here to look at the setup. It is to some degree a bit more messy, this ratio, a bit more difficult to wrap your head around. But I've tried to do my best. And ever since 2016, we actually have a pretty well-defined falling wedge here with a false breakdown. And now I want to show you, actually, false breakdown. And now we are just trying to unload that spring. We don't know which way we will go, but this might take, if we get back above here, that could be a very clear sign that this false breakdown here is what will, get the spring to the upside in favor of PEGA here versus Cameco. Again, as you know the saying, false breakdowns usually leads to a massive move in the other direction. And that is what we could potentially have here. Again, the big one to get through is obviously a 20-year-long golden trend line. But definitely we have some promising stuff here again. Again, we don't know which way this coil will spring. But if we get back above, that is a good sign, actually, that PEGA could be outperforming, could start to outperform heavily the CCJ. And PEGA is a very, very, very small uranium miner, or not miner, but uranium company compared to CCJ. So difficult setup, but I think there's something interesting going on right here. Again, you can look into that yourself. SASK here, again, this one has only been on the market for roughly a bit below 1 year. And the main takeaway for me really is this possible, and I say possible because we don't know the right shoulder, but this could be a big long-term inverted head and shoulders in the making. And obviously, before we can turn bullish in this ratio in favor of SASK, we need this one to trigger. And then you have your bias towards SASK compared to Cameco. This could easily also be, it could just fizzle out, obviously. But again, this is what we're waiting for. If that happens, I don't know if it will. If it happens, in my case, in my view, SASK should be considered over Cameco. I'm not saying that if you have Cameco and you have run it up, 10x, that you should rotate every single dime into this very, very, very small company. Obviously, no, because SASK compared to CCJ is a lot more volatile and a lot more risky. But again, you could maybe rotate 10%, whatever you feel like it, when that happens, and getting more juice from SASK compared to Cameco. You still have your main position, and I do think Cameco will do really well, for the next few years. And yeah, that's basically my takeaway from this very short-term chart right here. Here we have a fan favorite, that is the GOVX, GXU, in relation to Cameco. First off, I want to notice this insanely well-defined compression here. As we talked about, we have compression in the volatility. And then we had a tiny, tiny false breakout there. and then we came all the way down. And this right here, that event, in June 2022 is when people should have figured out, I do not want to, if I have to pick one, GoviX or Cameco, it has to be Cameco. Huge breakdown. And ever since we have been in this, want to lead my doodles right there. You can see it here. Cameco has heavily outperformed GoviX right here. In this, excuse me, in this golden channel right there on the way down. Actually pretty well defined, to be honest. And you can see we have just been grinding it here, and then we just pop down here. What I'm interested in right now is actually this beautiful, depending on how you want to draw it, inverted head and shoulders right there. We are basically at the blue neckline, which goes back roughly 8 months or so. That could be the start of something big in relation to Cameco. Obviously, we have that golden trend line there. That will be the next big one. But this, if this triggers, in my view, you will have GoviX outperform Cameco here, at least for some period. Obviously, the angle is heavily pointed downwards. You may have a spike, and then you will have, some consolidation, and then hopefully higher. But definitely, this spike here that we will get will be very good for GoviX in relation to Cameco. But for now, if that doesn't happen, Cameco is in control versus GoviX. But again, that bad boy right there, I think, should have your interest, and you should be looking at it for yourself, really. Global Atomic, I've also picked, again, also a fan favorite, very messy chart. We have this whole Niger situation here, but anyways, let's look into it here. The ratio seems to have a bottom at roughly 0.04. This whole Niger situation came all the way down to the lows again, and ever since it has been, please also note this blue parallel channel up here. Ever since it has been within this green uptrend here. We also had this tiny bull flag here, and then we continued higher. What I'm looking at right now is actually we came all the way up into what I call the waterfall level. And let me explain it quite a bit here. When everything really starts to pump to the upside or the downside, in this case, we just had we just ran straight off the cliff all the way down. That point where it triggers is roughly right here. Obviously, we have a big gap there, but that's where we trigger. And usually, if we are to return to that moment, you have a sell-off. You can go and look into this theory yourself. I find it very, very on point. It doesn't mean that we cannot go higher, obviously, but usually we have a sell-off right there, and then eventually we can go higher. The main thing right now for Global Atomic in relation to Cameco is to get back above that blue parallel channel right there. We did peak here. We had the sell-off, but definitely it wants to get back above. We don't, if we cannot get back above, obviously we will break down from that green uptrend, which is not ideal. Also note the 30 weekly is actually coming down pretty hard. So there's still some weekly and daily momentum to the downside that needs to be undone, and hopefully it can just stay here and then pop higher. So definitely the bulls and the bears are fighting for these levels and those channels right here. So the next into March, I think will be very interesting to see what happens here. I think this will be a decider for what to do. Hopefully we bull flag and then we go higher, obviously, if you want to have Global Atomic outperform the CCJ. But please note, a very messy chart, and that was my best takeaway from this. Here we have OBRN. I will call this a nano cap. It's a very, very, very small uranium company. But again, the main takeaway, just like we had on, I think it was SASK here, it's this one here. We need this one to trigger to get above that neckline. Maybe a retest, and then we want to go higher, but definitely a break here. And that stock, OBRN, could actually start to outperform, quite heavily against CCJ. Same thing again here. You shouldn't rotate all your 10x. I don't know if you have 10x, but all your gains, whatever, into that one doesn't make any sense. It's a very, very, very small minor, and that can be dilution. That can be all sorts of stuff going on there. A lot more risky, but again, a small portion of your portfolio. I mean, will definitely undo, well, not undo, but will deny most of that risk. So if it goes south for some reason, then again, it's only a very small portion. But again, you have a lot of upside in this stock here if this really wants to outperform. Again, we're only looking at the ratios here. I don't know how the chart is looking. It's only the ratio. Here we have AEC, also a very, very messy chart here again. AEC has just, for the past 10 years, underperforming heavily against Cameco. And by heavily, I mean heavily. Also, difficult chart to do. I have these two highs here for the main golden upper. Then we have an insanely well-defined lower here. But what caught my eye is actually this internal 6-year-long squeeze that is coming up right here. And we're actually peaking above right now. I'm still calling this very early. But also, before I go into what I was about to say, I will show you that we haven't made a higher high, for like, I don't know how many years, 10 years, whatever. No higher high at all. However, I think that could be the case if we break here. So how I would play this, I want to see the break, and then I want to see a higher high, hopefully with some sort of, breakout, retest, resumption kind of thing. But to make a higher high for the first time in 10 years, that means something in my book. Again, very difficult chart to do. And again, AEC is not I don't know if it's a nano cap. Is it? I think it is actually also a very, very small minor. Again, same thing as before, where you know how to do the risk reward maybe from Cameco into AEC. I mean, it's totally up to you. Last but not least, I took Mega Uranium. Personally, I'm very bullish on the Mega chart. If you look at MGA, the chart there, I think it's very bullish. It has broken a roughly 10-year-long basing pattern, broke out a few months ago. And in my view, it has a lot more upside to come. So, but in relation to Cameco, we can see here from the peak 2007, one move down, and we had that 1 to 5 wave massive correction into an insanely big bear flag actually right here. And what we're looking at, if we zoom in, very well-defined level here coming across over there. We had the break it down, retest, roll over. And actually now we are above the retesting levels. Well, almost above. We are very close. We are fighting with it here, the retesting levels. So what this needs to do for Mega to really become a heavy outperformer of Cameco, it has a lot of work to do. We have this blue trend line coming down here. Insanely well-defined. 1, 2, 3, 4 touches. Also, we have the big lower trend line from this red bear flag coming up as we speak. So it has a lot of work to do. And if we can get back into the bear flag, that is massively bullish getting into that bear flag. But again, we need to watch how it gets there. I still think it has a few months before it gets back in. So this is definitely also one to look for here. If you look very short term, the 30 weekly is coming up nicely. So short term here, we are in a bullish uptrend. But again, this level here is the first step to get through right there. And we are fighting with it as we speak. And then we have the next two big ones. For Mega against CCJ. So that is what I want to show you guys. Again, you can take Denison Mines, you can take Energy Fuels, you can take, I don't know which uranium miner or company and measure it against and do your own personal TA. And then you can maybe find, how you want to play this, this uranium bull market. Again, rotation is always happening. And at some point in time, one stock will be heavily overvalued in relation to another, and that's maybe when you need to consider some rotation. That is all, guys. Again, you know I'm a big uranium bull. I hope this was useful on this beautiful Sunday evening. So with that said, let me know in the comments below. And what do you think? And again, do you have any good ratios that makes sense? Let me know in the comments so I can have a look. I might not do a video on them. I might post them on Twitter, but again, I love the discussion and I love to learn from you, and hopefully you love to learn from me. So that is all I have to say. And thank you guys for being a part of this here. I will definitely pin this in my bookmarks and because there are some other good ideas here that I want to show people. I have huge hopes for gold and silver miners in 2024. So maybe we will do something, play around with those numbers. That is all, guys. Thank you for tuning in. A long video, but I think a lot of explanation. Hopefully it made sense. Guys, thank you for tuning in. As always, stay safe. Bye.